morning, everybody. Is everyone here had the chance to come last Sunday, except for our African traveler there? What we talked about was how the structure of an ancient Hebrew wedding and marriage ceremony is different than our perception. Now, in modern day times, a man will typically propose to a woman, ask her to marry him, she'll accept a ring, and then they'll plan on a date and have a wedding. And so the most important day in a modern day marriage is the wedding ceremony. But this is completely different than it was in ancient times, where we talked about the matchmaking process, where it was the father's responsibility to find a good match and mate for his daughter. And that didn't really take into account necessarily compatibility, who she would, romantically connect with. This was a connection that they made between families, something that would be economically beneficial for them or bring ties together with another family. So we had the matchmaking process, and then we had the betrothal process. The betrothal is the longest process in here, where after the man and his father decide who they're going to make a match with, or who the groom is going to be matched with, there is a series of events that happen. It's easier for me to, I told Marissa hers was the next picture coming up. Let's see, I didn't mean to go forward, I meant to go backwards. So we have the matchmaking process, and then the second part is the betrothal. A father works out agreement between the two families, and a bride price is determined. The bride price is really one of the more important elements in this betrothal process, and we're going to talk about today and go through more specifically things that are exchanged and things that are brought out through this wedding process. And one is going to be the bride price. So the bride price is the amount that the groom is going to put forth for the bride. And this is usually a large sum of money. And it's not that he is purchasing her. This was seen as a way to compensate her loss in the family, that she was going to be gone. And so this was an amount meant to honor the family. So it was usually a significant sum, a year to a year and a half worth of a salary. So you all can imagine, if you're going to spend that much and invest that much, it's a large sum of money. And if you are going to take on multiple wives, then only the rich and only the wealthy and the royal would be able to take on multiple wives because of this price. And that polygamy wasn't ordained in the Bible, but this was something that was practiced in ancient cultures. Secondly, a contract, which is called a ketubah, is drawn up between the families. And it states the agreed terms, and it includes the bride price and the property that she's bringing with her. So this sum of money, and it doesn't have to be money, it could be goods, it could be labor, and we'll see different examples of that throughout the Bible of things that were exchanged for a bride price. This amount was written down in the contract known as a ketubah that signified the legality and the specifics of their marriage. The groom would then come to the door of the bride and knock, and if she opens the door, then she accepts the proposal. So everything has been drawn up, the match has been made, the bride price has been settled, the contract has been drawn up, and then the groom will come to the door, and this is like a symbol, and if she opens the door, then she is accepting the proposal. The ketubah is then signed in 3 different copies, and the couple is betrothed. They are considered married but not consummated. And you all can see this whole process of, coming up into this point. This is a lot more. This is not something that happens in a modern day engagement. So you can see the importance of everything that has been, everything that has occurred. And now once this contract is signed, they are legally married. And as we said last week, this is the stage that Mary and Joseph were in. They were betrothed. They were legally married, but the marriage had not yet been consummated. I think when I think of that Christmas story, I think of an engagement, like he is tied to her in the form of an engagement, but this is really, he's tied to her in the form of a betrothal, where all of these steps and elements have already occurred. And even though they're engaged, if a couple, and I'm not speaking specifically about Mary and Joseph now, but if a couple was betrothed to one another and one of them had an affair, it was seen as they were being adulterous within a marriage. The groom then goes to prepare their marriage home on his father's property. So they are legally betrothed, and then they don't automatically get married the next day, have a ceremony. The groom then goes to his father's property and prepares either a room, an addition onto the existing house, or a house next to his father's property. And so during this length of time, which is typically a year, the bride will prepare herself. She will prepare herself to be a good wife. She will show her loyalty and faithfulness to her husband, and she will ready herself for her wedding by preparing her dress. She would also keep the oil in her lamp ready. And this, you all can think of the parable that I'm referring to, is the parable of the virgins who some of the 10 virgins, who 5 were ready and 5 were not. And this is all based upon this concept and based upon this structure for how marriages were performed. Because it was important for her to keep the oil in her lamp ready, because this brings us to the third part of the marriage process, the nisuin. When the groom's father permits, he then comes to his wife in a surprise procession, typically at night, announced by 2 witnesses who blow a shofar. So he's ready to get his bride. He's probably been ready for a long time, but it is the groom's father who says, it's now time to go and get your bride. And when the groom's father permits, he surprises her, typically in the middle of the night. And so when she hears this shofar in town being blown, and she is waiting for her husband, for her groom to come, then she's going to quickly ready herself, put on her dress, put on her veil, and get her oil lamp. Because it's the middle of the night, there's no flashlights, and she's going to have to see in order to be able to go out. And when you look out, you'll be able to see this wedding procession coming, because they will have their oil lamps. So when the groom comes to get his wife, she's stolen away by him. And they will meet under a chuppah, and you all have seen those. It's like a cloth covering with 4 poles. These are still used today in modern day Jewish wedding ceremonies. And modern day Jewish wedding ceremonies, there's not this separation. This is typically, it more matches a kind of modern wedding process, but during their wedding ceremony, they will typically get married under a chuppah. And once they meet under the chuppah, the groom will then lift the veil of his wife. And this is a symbol of him being able to being able to share like this intimate moment where he is uncovering his bride. Only he is able to do this. Because we talked about too, she will wear a veil out in public this previous year or however length of time that they've been separated to show that she is separate, that she is taken, and that she is spoken for. And so it will be the groom that will lift the veil, and the marriage is then consummated. And after the marriage is consummated, they stay in the bridal chamber. They stay in there for 7 days, just them two. And there will be people that will come and bring them food, but this will be, it's kind of like their honeymoon, where they are secluded to themselves. And at the end of those 7 days is when they come out then and present themselves to the entire wedding party, and everyone feasts, and everyone has a big celebration. That emulates the marriage supper of the Lamb. So as I'm describing this, and I hope you all do too, start to pick out different things that you've read in the Bible that makes you connect. Oh, this sounds like what this is talking about. And it's not only in parables, but it's also, as I said, in Revelation, the marriage supper of the Lamb. So this, I don't want to say this idea, but this ancient Hebrew wedding process is important to know because it allows you, it brings light to those scriptures that are talking about marriage. It's not in modern day concepts. It's in this procession and process by which I'm describing. So within this, there are particular elements. We talked about the bride price. We talked about the ketubah. And I want to start to pick apart some of these a little bit more. But I'm going to show this picture of Mercer and Ron again. Look at little Ben. He's so little. Look at little Daryl. Marissa got married during COVID. We had to wear masks and stay separated. But it was beautiful. I wanted to say too, I've been watching a lot of Christian apologetics on YouTube lately. I've been pretty fascinated with the difference in Christianity and Islam. And I think, I had some friends that were Muslim. I worked with some doctors who were Muslim. One gave me a Quran. And I started reading the Quran just out of curiosity. So I've always had just, I guess, a natural curiosity for what that religion entails. And it seems to be structured a lot similar to the Christian religion in that you have one God who is kind of over people. Like there's similar elements. And in the Quran too, there's also mention, of Jesus, and they talk about John and Moses. So there is an acceptance of some of these Christian elements. But also in the Quran, it says, no man can come to Allah except as a servant. And this is sometimes translated as a slave. So no man can come to Allah except as a slave. And you compare that to the relationship that God is describing with us. A marriage, the most intimate of relationships. In a marriage, you share good times, but you share bad times, and you walk through that, and you decide that you're going to walk through that with one person and stay committed to them no matter what. It's the vows you take for rich or for poor, in sickness and in health. You make a commitment to choose to walk with someone and not separate from them. And to think that God wants that relationship with us, that he's so committed to us, that he desires to have a marriage relationship versus us coming to him as a slave. as someone to do his bidding. And that's the best that we can enter into his presence, is to be considered a slave. But for him to desire, it's just such a beautiful comparison. And I think to me, and I mentioned before, I was asking John, how do you feel like as a man, when the Bible compares about marriage and you're going to be married to Jesus, like what in your mind does that show? And I think it's a good contrast to think that, Muhammad describes Allah as, a master, and we can only enter into Allah's presence as a slave. But the God, Yahweh of the Bible wants us to be married to him. He wants to love us and to die for us, and wants to be committed in the most intimate of relationships, knowing that commitment that he made is one that will bind forever. That's such a beautiful contrast to think about that for me. Yes, and that's a beautiful verse, and that's one of the ones that, in the hard times when I'm having to tell my patients difficult things, giving them difficult diagnoses, and when they're looking really, at terminally of their life ending, and it's like I speak that to myself too, He will go with you even into the end. He will never leave you nor forsake you. And those are the words and the verses that you have to hold on to when you face the most difficult things, to know that he is going to be with you. And like in a marriage, like I'm describing, your spouse, your earthly spouse may not be able to be there for you and be with you in all the times that you need, but your godly spouse, Jesus, he makes those claims, and he's able to fulfill those claims, that he will walk with you even to the end. Even to the end, he can hold you. So we have here the Iraseen, the betrothal. The terms of the marriage is determined and written in the ketubah. And the ketubah, as I said, is a contract that is drawn up that outlines all of the agreements that have been made. It has the bride's estate inventory and the bride's contributions financially. And it has the bride price. This is known as the mahar. The bride price is paid by the groom's father to the bride and to the father as a gift. So the bride price is the amount, which could be financial, it could be service in labor, or it could be goods. And this is paid to the bride's family. Because the groom's family has gained, they are coming to retrieve and take the bride into their family. But this was typically an amount that was shared with the bride. So this didn't, even though it exclusively went to the bride's father, he was often generous in sharing this amount with her. So while we would see it as a way of objectifying women by placing a price on her, it was seen as a way of honoring the bride and her family due to her loss. So the mahar, it would be equivalent to 1 to 2 years' salary. So this is a significant sum of money that you were deciding to place and give to the bride's family. And because it is such a large sum of money, there's a lot of investment that's attached to it, of course. So this elevates the importance of the institution of marriage. This is not something, poor John, he sometimes will get calls and people want to get married like tomorrow. Can you marry me tomorrow? It's sometimes these rash decisions where it's like, we suddenly need to get married. But if you were having to put up, a year to 2 years worth of salary, income, goods or labor, then you're going to think really hard about it. You're going to be dedicated and assured in your decision. So not only is the importance of the institution of marriage by placing this price that you have to work toward, but it's also the seriousness of the investment. It's something that you're going to be dedicated in. A bride price is also, it's talked about in Deuteronomy, where if a man were to rape a woman, then he was obligated to pay the bride price of 50 shekels of silver, which in that day and time would have been equivalent to around a year's worth of income. So it's a significant sum of money if a man were to rape a woman, because if a man raped a woman, she would not be a bridal prospect for anyone else. It would degrade her station in such a way that she would not be able to have a life, to have a family. No one would want someone that had been dishonored in that way. So the Bible outlines a process by which if a man raped a woman, then he would have to pay. He would have to pay for that. And then not only that, but he would be forced to marry her. And he could never divorce her. So he would have to pay the money up front. He would have to marry her. And he couldn't marry her for a year and then say, okay, goodbye. He was married to her for life. And while I think, when I read this, I think about in modern day times, how that would be undesirable. But this was meant as a way of protecting her and also of kind of discouraging this in the first place. That it was to discourage men being able to do this and destroy women without consequences. So in this way, she becomes legally protected and secured, whereas otherwise she would be considered undesirable and would be vulnerable in society. The bride price is a gift from the father out of his generosity. So as I was saying, sometimes it wasn't an amount, the bride price wasn't an amount that was just given to the father. The father would sometimes share it with his daughter. He was giving to her out of his generosity because he doesn't necessarily need this money. They are losing someone in their family, and this is a way of honoring her in her absence. But the father himself generally is established, and he doesn't need this money. So he will typically, it was seen as, being gracious to give it to his daughter. And this is echoed in Numbers 18:21. This is talking about the institution of the temple and the separation of the Levites as a priest. And see, I have given the children of Levi all the tithes in Israel as an inheritance in return for the service which they are serving, the service of the tent of meeting. So the Levites were, that was the priestly lineage. They were also responsible for, taking down the tabernacle and holding special position within the tabernacle. And because of this, because this is their specific job, they didn't have inheritance like the other tribes did. But the tithes that were taken up in the tent of meeting were then given to the children of Levi. So all of the Levites received this. So it was a generosity from the father out of his excess giving to the Levites. And so this is kind of echoed here in the bride price that is paid to the bride's family. The father would then give this to the daughter out of his blessings, out of his inheritance. And this money was kept as a security in the event that the groom, her husband, or her father had passed and she had a financial loss. This was like some backup and some savings that she would have. But the bride price also has spiritual significance and biblical relevance in that you were bought with a price. This is the amount of money that the groom has decided beforehand. This is what This is what I'm willing to invest. This is I see the worth of your daughter. And we said it was a significant sum of money, or labor or goods, that would have to be determined outright. So this is the worth that the bride would have. And we know the price that was paid for each of us. What God had determined would be our worth was the price of Jesus' blood, his only son. In that he decided, I will give my only son for this marriage. In 1 Peter 1:18 through 19, for you know that it was not with perishable things such as silver or gold that you were redeemed from the empty way of life handed down to you from your ancestors, but with the precious blood of Christ, a lamb without blemish or defect. In 1 Corinthians 6:19, do you not know that your bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit who is in you, whom you have received from God? You are not your own. You were bought with a price. You were bought at a price. Therefore, honor God with your bodies. It's this concept of he is the groom and he has put forth this price. He has put forth this price of what you were worth. And the price that he was willing to put forth was his life. And not only his life, but his only son. You know, we talked about the contrast between Allah. You can only enter him as a slave. But here you have a loving God, a merciful God, a just God who is willing to redeem you. The blood is not only the price, but it is the redemption, the atonement that makes you right. It is the thing that you need, and he was willing to provide that by laying down his life. So if this is the bride price that was paid for you, then what is your worth? I feel like so often we degrade ourselves. We know that we're not saved by works, but at the same time, when we sin and when we fall short, we're so hard on ourselves to just degrade ourselves and to feel like we're not worthy. And that feeling of unworthiness, I feel like is true. You just really see the difference, that you're not able to attain anything that God would necessarily expect from you, not without him. Just in yourself, in your striving, you will always fall short. And I feel like we can be so hard on ourselves, but God, before we were born, knew all of our shortcomings. He knew all of our sins, all of our struggles that we were going to have, seeing us, long for him one minute and then fall away the next. And even in him knowing that we would struggle this much in our life, he still saw it fit to send his only son and pay this bride price for us, to purchase us, even in our shortcomings, because it was his will to love us. And why? And why? I don't know the answer to that question. So, yeah, it's so beautiful. In Eden, when we were doing her nursery, and I can't remember which verse in Psalms it is, but I had it printed out, and it says, he numbers the stars and he calls each by name. And if he numbers the stars, when we look in the sky and they're so numerous, and even the light from those stars the light that we're seeing, those stars are long gone, but there are new stars even being created that we haven't seen the light for. And he knows all of these things that's going on, and he numbers them. He knows the number of each one of those. And in the same way, he knows us intimately. Even though we push away from him, and even though we just feel that wrestling of flesh and blood, and sometimes we feel like, and I say feel, we feel the emotions of wanting to raise our hands, and then other times it's like you just want to, you're flat on your face. But God, in this relationship, in this intimate marriage relationship that he has with us, he wants us to see us he sees us at our worst. He sees us at our worst, and he knows us at our worst, but he loves us and is dedicated and committed to us in a way that even before you were born, and even before you had all these feelings, he knew you, and he knew what your shortcomings would be, and he still sent his son to die for you. And it doesn't make sense to me. I can't reason that out, and I can't think of why, but I'm so thankful for that. So thankful for that nonetheless. And I just want you all to think about that, contrast that with the Muslim religion, where you can only enter into the presence of Allah as a slave. And how different is that from how God wants to have a relationship with you? This is a completely different relationship that you have with God. So in this religion, you are working, and you are proving, and you are doing, and you are showing your worth. You're trying to show yourself as a good slave. But in Christianity, our God counts our works and our righteousness as filthy rags. There's nothing, and what could we do? What could we do to prove our worth, to show that we are good enough to account for the blood that was spilt for us? We couldn't. But it doesn't negate works. The Bible says too that faith without works is dead. So that we don't work because we're saved, or we don't work for salvation. We work because we're saved. We work for God because we know the love that he has for us. And when we realize that, when we come to that full realization of what he did for us, then we want to do good things for God. We want to show our love in return. Not just to have, one person who's showing all the affection, who's doing all the things, but we want to have that marriage relationship that gives as well, not only takes. Let's see. I think I'll just go over these last 2 points here. Let's see. So we talked about the bride price, and we talked about the immense price that was paid for us, and how this also establishes this marriage relationship that we've been working through. But I've also mentioned about the ketubah. This is the contract that was drawn up, and this contract in it will include the bride price. Contains agreements made between the father of the bride and the groom's father and himself that outline the covenant of their marriage. What each of them are bringing forth, the expectations of the marriage. And there were 3 copies that were made. One was given to the couple, one was given to the bride's family, and then there was another sealed copy for judicial court. In the event that there was any contention or question about the marriage, this is the contract that was drawn up. And just to remind you, this is all in the betrothal process. The marriage has not, but we don't have what we would think of like a marriage celebration, consummation. None of this has occurred. This is all in the betrothal. So you can see the seriousness of the institution and what has already transpired, and how people would already be counted as being married because of what has already been agreed upon. So we have 3 copies of the ketubah. The one that is, let me just read this. One signed is sealed by witnesses and is opened by the courts for any determination or dispute. So the 3 copies that we have, one of them is sealed with a wax seal, and this is their official copy that they have for judicial purposes. And this is, there is a comparison by this in Revelation. So you think we have a marriage contract, we have an agreement that has been determined, signed, and sealed. The bride price is written inside of it, and we have a wax seal on the outside that's only to be opened by courts. So let's read here in Revelation 5, the scroll and the Lamb. Then I saw in the right hand of him who sat on the throne a scroll with writing on both sides and sealed with 7 seals. And I saw a mighty angel proclaiming in a loud voice, "Who is worthy to break the seals and open the scroll?" But no one in heaven or on earth or under the earth could open the scroll or even look inside it. I wept and wept because no one was found who was worthy to open the scroll or to look inside. Then one of the elders said to me, "Do not weep. See, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the Root of David, has triumphed. He is able to open the scroll and its 7 seals." This scroll that was sealed, having the price that he paid for it. Who was worthy to open the scroll but Jesus, who paid the price? Who paid the price and was able to break the seal. Thank God for that. Thank God for that. It brings such power to those verses, knowing the intent, knowing what was contained within inside, knowing the cost that it cost him, that only he, having paid the price, was able to open this scroll and open the seals. The 7 seals signifying a completion, a finishing, and he is able to finish. I don't know what more to say, so to avoid saying anything I shouldn't, I'm going to end it there. Thank you.